Welcome to another edition of the Brian Turner Basketball Podcast. Before we get going, can you please like and subscribe to the channel? My goal is to grow this channel within the next year as much as possible, full of basketball content, full of health content, full of life content. So do yourself a favor and make sure you click the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell for all notifications. Also, this video is being brought to you by and powered by SeatGeek.com. SeatGeek.com is an online ticketing app. So any music concert, any comedy concert, any sporting event, baseball, football, basketball, go over to the app, use promo code Coach Turner to get $20 off your first purchase at checkout. Appreciate your time. I'm glad you was able to find this channel. I hope you like this video.
Yep.
Oh man, Coach, man, welcome to the show, man. This is an honor, man. This for someone, man, just been knowing, man. I've been knowing the name pretty much, man, my whole basketball career. Man, what does it feel like? Just we in the what's this? This is 2022. Growing up playing, did you ever think that you would reach the heights of being probably named arguably like one of the best basketball players ever to come out of St. Louis?
No. For me, kind of like you, and I think everybody else who played the game in our generation, we played the game with a different motivation and a different focus. It was more for the love of the game. It was an opportunity to be involved in something to keep us focused, to play at Herbert Hoover Boys Club or Matthews Dickey. It was an opportunity to continue to just stretch yourself, man, and play basketball, football, baseball season, bowling, pool. It didn't matter. We were just active. And it was just something I know in my particular case, which we'll get into later, it was just God's plan for my life because it surely wasn't my plan for myself.
Mm-hmm. So for the listeners, just let's take us back to like those early days. Like where did you grow up and when did you first like fall in love with the game?
Well, I grew up on the west side of St. Louis, Natural Bridge and Goodfellow, the west side. So we used to play. I grew up playing football. I played JFL football from the time I was 6 all the way up to 13. Started playing basketball in the neighborhood like everybody else, just recreationally. Just come home from school, do what you're supposed to do. We on the hard top playing basketball or over in the park playing football or playing court. Got to high school, should have went to Northwest, Beaumont, or Central. But I got bused to Vashon High School all the way from the west side. And at that time, I had never played organized basketball. I'd only played football. But being in ministry now, I look back and know that God had ordained it because he sent me to the best basketball high school at that time, knowing what my future would entail, that basketball was in my future. Didn't play my freshman year, showed up to practice 5 minutes late to try out for the team. Coach Iron said, try again next year. So I had to wait a whole nother year and play B team. And B team was what I needed because I wasn't varsity ready. I wasn't mature enough. I had no real understanding of the game of basketball. Played B team with Coach Edwards over at Matthew Dickey's Boys Club and a couple middle schools. By this time, I'm probably 6'5". The next year roll around, I'm standing 6'7". Coach Iron sees me in the hallway and asks me if I'm ready to try again and just says, if you do everything I asked you to do on and off the court, you're going to have an opportunity to go to college. And that was big for me coming from a family of 6, 5 boys, 1 girl, because none of my 3 brothers, older brothers, or my sister or my mom and dad had went to college. So I was a first-generation college attendee and wound up being a first-generation college graduate. So it was just a process, man, that I can't take any credit for, but I surely embraced once I understood what it required of me and the dedication that it would take to receive it.
Right, because I mean, you said a great thing as far as just like it humbled you. And a lot of folks, everybody has this instant gratification nowadays when you see the youth that, if you don't play or sniff the varsity your freshman year, you leaving, transferring schools. But you said, and you kind of spoke to that, you felt like that was something that you needed right off the bat to kind of humble you and to put things in perspective as far as I got to get myself together if I want to play. Would you say that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, take it to another step. I mean, I was at a school that had a culture and a winning tradition. I was at a school that didn't need me. The system was already in place. We already had a coach who had already won one state championship by the time I made the team in 1984. And he was just really getting it rolling. He was an educator, a former alumnus of the school who was coming back not to win state championships and games, but to empower young Black men to rise above their circumstances, their conditions, and to seek more out of life through the game of basketball. So it was an honor and a privilege for me to even be considered one of those 14 young men to wear that Vashon jersey and be poured into by Coach Irons, for him to see something in me and for me that my own father couldn't see, because my dad was a cab driver. He was a blue collar worker. He didn't go to college. He didn't know anything about it. But the great thing about it was my dad realized that this man could do something for me that he couldn't. So he didn't stand in the way like a lot of dads today want to try and control the narrative of how it goes for their sons.
Yeah, absolutely. And so even just transitioning to that, so take us back through your sophomore year and you started developing. You just said like your dad was a cab driver. Was you started to develop like that hard blue collar attitude when you approached the game, or was it just something that you constantly worked on in the gym? Like how did you establish your niche as a player going into your sophomore year?
Well, I think I had it. Apples don't fall far from the tree. My dad, like many men of his generation, was a hard worker. My dad picked cotton growing up, so he came from the South to the Midwest. He come from a family of 12, so it was innately given to me. I think that once I was able to realize that basketball was going to be a vehicle for me to further myself and better myself and get an education, and walk through some doors that I otherwise couldn't walk through, I knew that I had to give it everything I had. And knowing that I was far behind, players could dunk, players could use their left hand, players could dribble. I couldn't do any of that. All I could do was work hard. So I knew I was at the bottom of the food chain in the totem pole. But what I had a great coach who was patient. He continued to teach me how to drop step and how to keep the ball high and how to take bigger steps so that my stride would match my size. I had teammates who poured into me, who stayed after practice and threw me the ball and reminded me to keep it high. They didn't put me down. They didn't laugh at me because I couldn't dunk, because they realized at some point they were going to need me down the road. So they helped my confidence instead of destroying it. So there was no envy or jealousy. It was a family. So I was just blessed to be in an environment, man, where I was allowed to grow at the pace that I needed to grow at and not be pushed too far too fast with false expectations.
Let me talk to you guys real quick about Amazon. I'm introducing a new Amazon storefront. And what I'm going to be doing is over the next couple of videos, I'm going to review a couple different services, a couple different products, and give recommendations on some things that I will use, and I will give my stamp of approval. We have different things that are going on and different products I want to try to test out, I want to use. So hopefully this channel can be the destination for you guys to at least observe, or if you can recommend it to a friend or to someone else that may be able to use it. And it's not just going to be limited to just athletic things or sports related things, but we're going to have all different type of unboxings, all different type of products, all different type of services that I want you guys, the listener, to check out. So again, these next couple videos, these next couple audio editions will be powered by Amazon. So make sure you hit the link in the description. So give it a test out.
Right. Because I mean, you see it so much where you got, you may have kids getting ranked in the fourth grade, ranked in the fifth grade, on a national scale, when you really haven't played against everybody. And then to put a kid or someone in that situation, it's kind of like you bumping your head. It's like the ceiling, or have you reached your potential? Do you have room to grow?
Yeah.
When did you feel like that? Okay, because even I would probably say, like I said, I didn't get a chance to see you throughout high school, but just the stories of what I heard. How did you make that transition to becoming like an elite player? When did the light click on where you said to yourself, like, man, I might be on to something here?
Well, I think at the beginning of my senior year. My junior year, I came off the bench for a state championship team that went 27-5. Played behind Kenny Redman Williams. Played in specific situations, but was able to get a little confidence here and there. We come back my senior year. We're ranked second behind Webster Groves, who had 3 Division I players in Sam Ivey, Chris Ogden, and Paul King. 2 went to Murray State, 1 went to Wake Forest. They're ranked number 1 over us, despite the fact that we had won the state championship, but we only had 1 returning starter, but we had the same coach, the same culture, the same system, the same expectation. Going into that year, we played Webster Groves in the damn 7-up shootout, and we beat them by like 45 points, almost 50 points, and they were number 1. That's when the light came on, that we knew we were going to destroy people because we took it personal. And I went from not being able to dunk to jumping over the top of the square, from jumping rope all summer, and being able to steal the ball and go to the length of the court and finish it and dunk it. And my numbers weren't, I would say, jumping out of the box in terms of numbers a day. I only averaged 15 points and 17 rebounds. But it was the manner in which it happened and the intensity in which we played that you can see that there was potential, untapped potential, that my best days were going to be in front of me because I had just started playing.
Mm-hmm. And Coach, man, you kind of hit it dead on as far as like what you brought to the table can just transcend anything, because exactly what you're saying, you hardworking, you going after the ball, and I guarantee probably plays when probably ran for you. You went and got every single thing that you wanted to go get. So people could probably see that. Coaches will probably see that and said, if I can just have that person at the college level in my system, man, we can work wonders. So talk about just that recruiting process. You played for legendary Coach Grawer. How did that transition work as far as did it stick in your mind that I want to stay local? Or did you feel like, man, I needed to kind of branch out my horizons a little bit more and maybe see some other things? So how did the recruiting process work?
No, it was amazing because you go from not being on anybody's radar to being on countless radars. And I remember Rick Ball, who was a big basketball analyst and expert back during the times. Mm-hmm. Then he's still around now. One of his
shout out to Rick Ball.
One of his commentaries about me particularly was that I had to go JUCO, that I was a JUCO player because I was still raw and green, which I was. But I continued to get better every day in every game because I fell more in love with the game. But again, man, it goes back to having a great coach who's a visionary, who can see things. Georgetown came on the scene, wanted me to visit Georgetown. Mizzou came in the picture late and offered me, but they weren't in the picture in the beginning. UConn, a bunch of other schools that were on the rise, Xavier out of Ohio. But St. Louis U was always there with Coach Grawer and the late, great Coach Winfield, just consistently at practice, consistently writing letters. And then there was SIU Carbondale, the Salukis, with Coach Herring. Mm-hmm. So Anthony Jones and I wanted to go to school together. And if I was a little bit wiser back then, I would have made it a three-peat where they would have had to take Gerald Jones as well, because we had that kind of power where you take all 3 or you don't take any. And there were schools who would have done that. But we didn't know that then. We were 17 years old. So Coach Orange told Anthony Jones and I, he was like, when you graduate and you get your degree, do you see yourself living back in St. Louis or living out of town? We're like, no, we want to live in St. Louis. He said, well, think about this. You can go be a small fish in a big pond at Georgetown. They can forget about you. You can get lost in the shuffle, get homesick, and all those things. Or you can be a big fish in a small pond and grow right here at home with a program that's on the rise. They had just signed Myron Rowland. We knew we'd have a great chance the following year possibly to get one of your alumnus in Craig Upchurch. We knew that Jesse Hall was on the horizon. We knew that we could possibly build something in St. Louis that could be really special, that had never been done before. And here it was, someone who started playing as a sophomore was now center stage and would have a chance to be a part of that. It was just the wisdom of my high school coach pointing out you can play in front of your mom, your dad, your friends. Vashon is right down the street from St. Louis U. You can have the academic support you need, the social support you need right here at home.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the same notion that I took with the point guard that's at SLU right now, Yuri Collins, with just having that same type of conversation with, you got family members, you got younger brothers that, you can come to their games, watch them
Yeah,
play, support them, because it's just kind of like, it's a village. And if they see
yeah,
that you able to be around, support them, they going to go just as hard. So I always, would always
exactly.
tell him just to kind of, it's other schools that, they come late on the scene, but it's always about that one that's making you a priority. Would you feel that
Yeah,
SLU made you a priority?
I did. I think they made me a big priority. I mean, I know for a fact that I was not on their radar at the beginning of the season. They had Sam Ivey and Chris Ogden on the radar, the guys we beat
Mhm.
at Webster Grove. But it's like you tell people all the time, and you mentioned it earlier, it's not where you rank, it's what you do where you at. Somebody can come see one player, and if you playing the game the right way, they leave away talking about you instead of the player they came to recruit. It happened that way in an NBA combine for me. They came to see Tyrone Hill and walked away talking about Anthony Bonner. You see, so it's just a special opportunity anytime any young man is able to represent his local university. And when it's a Division I university, that was growing and that has grown right now, like the young man Yuri you placed down there. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity that you don't get again. Not every young man is going to have an opportunity to look back and be thankful for. It's great if you can go to Duke or Georgetown or North Carolina. That's amazing. I love it. But it's still not the same as being at home in front of your loved ones, your local community, the place that helped you become who you are.
Hmm. And it's like we the hottest ticket in town. If you the basketball player or the basketball team from St. Louis, that's our NBA team. That's our local team that all of the kids want to have those jerseys. They want to go down there. They want to support because we don't have the luxury of having those NBA teams. So, do you feel like when you first got on the scene at SLU that it was a learning curve, or did you see the difference between high level high school basketball and the Division I level in playing for SLU?
Absolutely, coach. There's a learning curve. The higher you go, the higher the learning curve. I mean, you never arrive completely prepared and ready because
Hmm.
there's just so many unknowns and so many intangibles. The players are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're smarter, they're more mature. There are different schemes offensively and defensively. Adjusting to the 15 hours that you have to take as a freshman, the freedom, the independence, the meal plan, the lack of resources, the girls, the alcohol, the bars. It really goes on and on. So to say that you're ready for the unknowns, you're foolish and really you're lying. When you get to college, you have to rely on other people who've been there to help show you the way and help you navigate the landscape so you can stay there. Getting there is half the battle. Staying there remains the challenge once you get there because there's so many things that can get you off task and help you forget why you're there. You're there to be a student athlete, not to be the king of kicking it or the most popular big dog on campus. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we see that a lot of times, and I always tell people, college make you, rethink if you really want to do this, because like all of those things you just pointed out, you got a small window and a decision that has to be made later on that night. If I'm gonna spend some time kicking it, or if I'm gonna give me some rest to be able to do this all over again the next day, and you have to be
Yeah,
like dead on and mentally focused and locked in because you know you can be tempted easily because you hold that stripe of being a student athlete where your buddies or your some folks that's on your floor, they can party all night and get up and go to class
yeah,
and not have those responsibilities, but you have
yeah.
a big responsibility if you're going to wear that jersey.
You do. And then even athletically, I mean, you're going in competing with guys who've been there. They're familiar with preseason conditioning. You're not. You have no idea how hard it is to go through preseason conditioning. That's not high school conditioning, you know? And then the weight room, and then competing for minutes. You're a highly touted freshman, so there's an expectation that's placed on you that you could possibly be newcomer of the year, a starter. You know, a lot of guys who are there who are sophomores and juniors, they're going, oh, he's a freshman. I'm coming at him. He ain't taking my spot. You got to go in and respond to that with the proper energy and the proper focus, because you're competing for minutes and a place to show that you belong.
Right. And coach, like you had a high level skill set when it came to just like finding the ball, because you led the nation in rebounding. Were there certain things that you worked on or that you kind of honed on? If it's like, let's say if it's a player listening right now who has expectations of probably doing something like that, what are some of the things that you could possibly say, this is what I worked on more than anything in order to be able to have some of those attributes?
Well, the first thing we realized, I'll answer that twofold. The first thing I found from playing for so long, there are three types of rebounders. There are size rebounders like Shaq. You're a 7-footer, you can just get a rebound. There's positional rebounders like a Charles Oakley, who can't jump. He's not very athletic, but he boxes out. He uses great technique to create space. And then there are just raw, talented rebounders like Dennis Rodman. He just go get it. He's a combination of both, but he's really just a guy who will go get it. So for me, in the beginning, I learned how to be a technique rebounder. I had to. Ultimately, I learned how to be just one who went and got it, because I jumped a lot of rope, working on my quickness, did a lot of bench jumps, hopping back and over the bench to increase your vertical, did a lot of footwork stuff, learned how to play before, to track the ball before it was shot or right after it was released. So tracking the ball, getting a better understanding of where it could potentially bounce and be at that spot before the ball bounced. So you're moving, as soon as the ball is shot, you're moving to go to the location of the ball. Okay, and then you're going after every ball, which increases your opportunity to get more balls. So you're participating in the process where you're constantly moving. And what I found, Coach, one of the biggest keys to being a great rebounder has nothing to do with rebounder. It has everything to do with conditioning. Or you're in better shape than your opponent, because then you can outwork them. Because most big guys don't like to work, bruh. They don't even like to box out. They just like to go get the ball. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's conditioning. And then lastly, I told this to my goodness, Cook, that graduated from Chaminade with Jason Tatum, Tyler Cook.
Yep,
I told Tyler Cook the difference between your hands being above your shoulders and below your shoulders was $1 million for him. Because it's 7 rebounds or 12 plus rebounds. Just the fact my hands are in position, I'm quicker to react to the ball and I have less distance to travel because my hands are already up and I'm ready to go get the ball. So it's just some fine-tuning things I think that kids can learn, and that they don't have to be limited to just one of those 3 areas, because if you have a nose for the ball, you're going to go get the ball. Look at Jordan Goodwin, who graduated from SLU. The kid had a nose for the ball.
Jordan.
Yeah, he had a nose for the ball.
Yeah, and you said it too, and it makes a big difference. If you have that nose for it and you're going to go get it, you're going to outwork your player. And it's something about when players outwork you, it's demoralizing to the other team. So now you're showing your value, not just as far as being a statistical guy going to get it, but other teams can see you can add value to even helping the team win. Would you say that that's the case?
No, for sure. I mean, as a player right now, either you're making plays that impact winning or plays that contribute to losing. And that's why that NBA plus-minus system is in place. Like, you want to make more plays that impact winning. And it shouldn't be that you're called a two-way player, because you're supposed to be a two-way player anyway. You're supposed to give it your all on both sides of the ball. You can have an off night offensively, but you never have an off night defensively, effort-wise, and in the energy department, because that's a constant and it's needed, to be able to go out there and give your all, because playing this game is a privilege. It's not a right. It can be taken away from any one of us any given night by a simple ankle tweak, coming down wrong in the layup line, stretching a knee, taking a charge, even getting out of bed in the morning. It can be taken from you. So you should never take it for granted and leave it out there every time you're blessed to be out there in practice and especially in the games.
Mm-hmm. So, Coach, take us back to that night where you kind of you on the draft board, you going through the whole draft process. I'm pretty sure it was exciting to everyone in your family. I'm pretty sure it was exciting to you that you finally you probably said, "Hey, I made a goal and I set out to accomplish this goal." But kind of, I want you to talk about that process and then having that understanding that once you made it there, that's just the beginning. That's not the final destination, like you kind of pointed to earlier. Once you get there, now the real work has to start because you want to stay there. You want to have long
Yeah.
lasting power to stay there. So take us back to that whole process, that draft process, going through everything with your family and kind of that excitement. And then talk about making that transition from college to the NBA.
Well, I mean, BT, man, it was overwhelming and it was unbelievable because there was so much happening at that time. I just completed a senior year where I averaged 19.8 points a game and 13.8 rebounds, leading the nation at a school that was not a basketball powerhouse, where any given night there were 25 NBA scouts sitting there watching. That was a transition in itself because, you're auditioning every given night, and that can unnerve you where you try and do too much to impress them instead of just playing. But I thank God for Coach Winfield, who just had a simple saying, who was an NBA player himself for 7 years in the NBA, went to Northwest High School. He would always tell me, he'd say, "Big fella, ain't no pressure if you're doing what you're supposed to do." And that's as simple as it was. He say, "Do what you know to do, and it ain't no pressure." I say, "Okay, Coach." So I wound up getting drafted. But at the same time that year, I was able to get my degree in 4 years. So that was special, that I was graduating from college in May, about to be a potential first round pick in June, that I couldn't believe that I started playing as a sophomore, rode the bench as a junior. I'm Mr. Basketball in 1986 over guys who've gone to ABC camps, Nike camps. Rick Ball has said this guy's going to be this, that, and the other. So I look back at it, man, and I began to think how supernatural it was and how unnatural it was that God would take somebody like me who was unknown, untouted, unheralded, and allow me to go to the NBA over guys who were sure fire NBA players like Monroe Douglas, Roland Gray, Rico Weddington. There are many other players I can name. Tim Norman, who had way more talent, way more experience. That, man, I was just really humbled and honored to know that there was something in it beside the fact that I was going to the NBA. I was chosen to do something greater. And on draft night, I decided not to go to New York. We went to my agent's house. It was my mom, my dad, two of my brothers, a couple friends. We just kind of sat there, man, and let the names roll off. And when my name was called, I was just numb. I was thankful, but I was numb because nobody in our generation had done that before. The last guy I believe was David Thirdkill, maybe, who came out in the 80s from Sodan, who went to Bradley and went to the Celtics and won a championship. Then you had Steve Tabanovich from DeSmet, who also played with the Indiana Pacers. We knew of those guys, but we never saw them in the community. We never touched them. And we had Marshall Rogers, who had been around, who had played with Golden State. We knew of them, but we had never really touched them. So, man, I don't even have words now, even as I look back at it and knowing that every time I walk in the room, even right now, God bless me to be part of the 1%. You're part of the 1% of guys who've ever made it to that level. Even if you made it there for a 10-day contract, you were considered one of the best at the skill set that you had. And transitioning to the second part of your question is getting there. You know, when I went to Sacramento, Sacramento was not a team with great expectations. We had some great players. We had Spud Webb. We had Ralph Sampson, who was 3-time ACC Player of the Year and arguably one of the best big men to ever play. We had the late, great Wayman Tisdale, who scored 3,000 points in 3 years at Oklahoma, who was an unstoppable lefty. We had Dennis Hobson, who won a championship with the Chicago Bulls. We later traded for Mitch Richmond, who's an NBA Hall of Famer. But we never won more than 30 games. We were in the bottom. We were in the basement. So I had to learn how to step up again to the maturity of those guys, because a lot of those guys were not one and done. These guys were 3 and 4 year college matured, ready to go in and play. They had families. They were grown men. They were about business because this is the way they fed their families and they ate. So you had to come in, man. And Roy Sparrow was my vet. He took me under his wing and began to teach me how to be a pro, how to not joke as much in the locker room, how to be there earlier than early, what I thought early was, how to stay late, just how to break down film and look at your opponents, because I was blessed to guard 1 through 5. My scouting reports were different than some of the other guys who were forwards, because I would guard Reggie Miller on one night. I would guard Karl Malone the next night. I'd guard Mike. I'd guard Mitch Richmond or a big point guard. So any given time, they might even throw me on Shaq just because I was strong enough and I had good enough footwork to make it difficult for him to score. I couldn't stop him, but I made him work. So just embracing the game from that point where you forget, yeah, I averaged 19 in college, but it's sexy to be a defensive stopper. It's sexy to be a guy who brings energy off the bench. It's valuable to be a guy who can change the tempo of the game and effective without scoring a basket if you don't have to. That was a big transition for me to embrace.
Man, that's crazy just to think. Like, I mean, and that was my first time even knowing that. Like, I knew, you know, they give positions to people, you know, and I think throughout, you know, your career, they had you penciled in as like a small forward, but like you said, you were a wing, a big wing, and so talk about even making that transition from Sacramento to even playing with New York, to where though all of you guys were just known as defensive guys, defensive stoppers, and having to play, you know, man, high level basketball on a winning team.
Yeah, well, it was night and day, bro. You know, Sacramento didn't renew my contract. I had a 3-year contract. My agent advised me to sign a 3-year deal. Sacramento wanted 5, but my agent was like, no, let's do 3. You can be a free agent sooner. And Sacramento didn't renew my deal, so I was a free agent. So when I went to New York, there were 25 guys trying out for one spot. Michael Jordan had just retired. New York was picked to win the championship. There was one spot. I went in and I knew I had to take that spot. So when I went in, I matched up against Anthony Mason. We went mano-a-mano, head-to-head for 2 straight days. When it was over with, Jeff Van Gundy, who coached the Knicks and is now a TNT guy, he and Dick Harder got on the phone and called Pat Riley and said, this guy's one of us. He's the one. He's one of us. So I went in, I made that team. I looked how I could play on a team that had already established itself and had gone to the Eastern Conference Finals several times before I got there. They were picked to win a championship. So I knew my job was to dive on the floor. It was to deny the ball. It was to be the hardest worker on that team, because I knew Pat Riley respected that. And I went in, BT, man, and I made a place for myself, and I was respected in the locker room, and I was expected to perform what it is I brought to that team. Toughness, finishing at the rim on the fast break, handling the ball, pushing it up the court, and just fitting into a culture where the standard was win a championship, not make the playoffs. So the expectation is totally different there. We were the first team on the floor in 1993. We had practice at midnight, and our goal was to be the last team off the floor in 1994. And we almost were, because we lost by 7 points in Game 7 to the Houston Rockets in the NBA Finals. But being a part of a team like that, man, you never forget, because there was complete buy-in. There was total accountability by the coaching staff, and we were without excuse. We had everything we needed to win that championship that year, but we ran into a better team at that time.
Right. Before we transition out, can you give us a Jordan story? You got any Jordan story that you can give us that just maybe folks kind of don't know about, that you can just say, as far as like, how was it even? Because you were on that team when he came back and played in the Garden, correct?
Yeah, the double nickel.
I don't remember.
Yeah, they called it the double nickel. Well, I'll tell you that day that game was an afternoon game on NBC. And Pat Riley was real, like, amped just about Michael Jordan not getting off, because he had just come back out of retirement. Like, whatever you do, keep this guy under control. Keep him under control. So they were cleaning the garden out. It smelled like elephants and giraffes and everything else. So he gets out there, man, and he gets going. It was something personal about New York, the Garden, and then you add John Starks to that. That's just like putting meat on a barbecue grill that's already blazing. So he gets out there, man, he starts going at John Starks, and before you know it, he got 12 or 15. Then they throw mace on him. He run off another 10. Then he calls my name, and I'm looking, already knowing, man, I hate this kind of situation, because I got my own little defensive tricks that I do to try and keep a guy from getting going. They don't always work, but when you throw me on him and the fire already blazing and I ain't got no water, I'm going to get burned. Sure enough, I go out there, man, I'm all up in him. I jump, he fades a little bit farther. Bucket. He drives baseline, plants, shot fake. I jump. Now he jumped. Bucket. He was already going now by BT. There's nothing I can really do. But I will tell you this, man, and I know he'll say the same thing. He always had to beat me with his best stuff. His first stuff wasn't good enough, because I was trained by some good coaches at Vashon High School and at St. Louis University, where my defensive principles and technique were sound. I wasn't a big gambler. I took away space. My feet were quick enough. Dude was just phenomenal. And I'll add this to that story before you go. You'll get a chuckle out of this. One night we were going to Chicago, and Charles Oakley and I were going to meet him out at a club. Our plane was late. So when we got in, by the time we got to the hotel, checked in, and met him at the club, Mike was leaving. So him and Oak began to small talk and blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me, he go, "AB, what you doing here?" I go, "What you mean what I'm doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm going to light John up. And then they're going to throw mace on me. And then they're going to throw you on me. You need some sleep." I was like, okay. All right. I got you.
Oh, man. Nah, that's amazing right there. Just to even be in those conversations. But like what you just said, man, like you've been an ambassador, a pillar of the game, even just in St. Louis, because for the longest, I always thought when people said, "All right, we're going to play in the Bonner League," that I didn't even know that was your league. Like how did that even come about, as far as having like a pro-am named after you, and then just having this synonymous with just a generation of people saying, "All right, we're going to play in the Bonner League. We're going to play in the Bonner League." So talk about that real quick.
Well, one of the things for me, when I was at St. Louis University, we didn't have a lot of places to play. People didn't come back home. We spent a lot of summers just training or trying to get people together to play at UMSL or Forest Park, wherever we could get them together. But for me, I was very blessed, because God connected me with a lot of people where I would spend my summers. I'd go down to the U of I, play with Steve Bardo, Kendall Gill, all those guys down there. Or I'd go to University of Michigan up in Ann Arbor, and I'd play in a league called the Sandy Sanders League with Glenn Rice and a bunch of those guys that went to the University of Michigan. So I was always taking my game somewhere else to see where I stood. Like I always needed
Right.
to measure myself. Am I getting better? Where do I rank with these guys who are ranked in the top 25 if I really want to be one of those type of players? So once I made it to the NBA and I had the resources and I had the people around me who I knew who loved basketball, we just put our money where our mouth was, man, and started a league and created an atmosphere.
Hold on, Coach. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Hello. Hey. Yeah, I'm gonna try to do it here in the right before I go to lunch. All right, go ahead. All right, sorry about that, Coach. So you're saying that you
No, that's
always
okay.
was testing your game out, making sure that you're trying to figure out where you stood with the competition on a national level.
Yeah. And so with that, when I made it to the NBA, I knew that a lot of the guys locally were going to face the same challenge I faced, that they needed a place to develop their gift to be challenged. So we started the Bonner League. It originally started out being the River City Pro-Am League, but it eventually became the Bonner League because it was a Pro-Am and I was the only pro in the town. And I was the pro who I think attracted other people to want to come and play from Mizzou, from Illinois. It was meant to bring Chris Carwell home from Duke so that he could get better while he was home, or Chris Carr from SIU Carbondale, bring down Anthony Peeler and Doug Smith to entice people to want to come down and play. And it grew beyond what we could ever imagine because, as you said, man, it has a legacy of its own. Every pro who's come out of that city, aside from this new generation of players, played in the Bonner League.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a great honor, even just to be, to go to the games, to sit there. It was like our summer league, and I think now, they're making a conscious effort of getting guys back around. But I mean, it was nothing like having like an ambassador like yourself, being able to just kind of usher that whole wave in. And even when I tell guys to this day that, yeah, we getting a lot of exposure and a lot of pros coming out of the St. Louis area, but that's built on the backs of some of these guys that kind of laid the foundation. And then you absolutely being one of those guys at the top of that list. So, man, I really appreciate you sitting down and having this conversation. I really want to kind of get into one last thing, and that was just about, the coaching career, like, and just being an ambassador. Like, what is going on now? How are you giving back to the game? And just talk about that experience of taking over for your high school coach at Vashon, and some of the things that you're doing right now with the youth as far as constantly working out with them.
Yeah. Well, it was a privilege and an honor for me to even be considered to coach my alma mater. I just think the timing was kind of crazy because there was a lot going on with Coach, his stepping away, and it was a very difficult situation at that time. But nonetheless, it was one that I'll always cherish and relish because, it allowed me to keep the ship afloat, if you'll say, until they could really find the coach who would be the coach as they have in Tony Irons, where the program didn't just plummet to the basement. We didn't win a state championship by any means, but the culture was still established. The expectations were still in place. And we were still able to help a lot of young men play basketball and further their dreams and get to school and go to college. When I left Vashon High School in 2009, after 3 years, I transitioned into full-time ministry. And part of my ministry now allows me to continue traveling the world, playing basketball, ministering to people, doing camps and clinics. Down here in Georgia, I have a youth academy where I train about 50 kids 2 to 3 times a week. My son being one of those kids who's on the hoop radar right now and who's developed into one of the best 8th graders in the nation right now. He's already 6'6" and 13, plays all 5 positions, already being looked at and recruited by some schools, teaching him to value the game and play the game and honor the game, and really paying off for him in a way that really makes me proud that God would allow me to be his father, but also learn how to be his coach without damaging that relationship as his father, pushing him too far, too fast, and too hard. So life is great, man. And I will tell you that the majority of the credit goes to the game of basketball. It opened a lot of doors. It equipped me in a way I could never be equipped. Every time I see it, a kid playing it, I take it as a responsibility to alert him to the great doors it can open to him if he's willing to embrace being coachable. And being coachable means embracing the unknown and the uncomfortable, because I'm going to challenge you in a way you've never been challenged, to prepare you for something that you have no idea that's in front of you. That doesn't mean I don't like you or I don't respect your game, but I have to prepare you for what lies ahead because you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Man, no, that's gold right there, Coach. Man, I appreciate it. And with that being said, I want to say I usually close with making sure that we're grateful for every sunrise and make sure that we're thankful for every sunset. And again, I want to thank you for taking out this morning to get a chance to talk, give some game up, tell these stories, and man, and God bless everything that you got going on, and continue to be an ambassador to the game. So I appreciate it.
You too, man, and thank you, brother. You're a class act. It showed that our labors and everything we did wasn't in vain, because young men like you come behind, and though you and I have not had a lot of personal interaction like that, man, you picked up some of the seeds that we left behind. You've eaten from the tree of wisdom that we've left behind. So continue doing what you're doing. God bless you, brother, and keep helping this next generation of young student athletes.
Bet. All right. Appreciate you.
All right, Coach.
I'll hit you up in a second. Okay.
All right. Later.